I'm U.S. Senator Lisa Murkowski, and this is The Elephant in the Room.
Welcome to The Elephant in the Room. I'm your host, Cyrus Pearson.
I'm your co-host, Sophie Delkier.
Our guest today, Sophie, is the Senator Lisa Murkowski from Alaska. And I've got some facts for you. You like Alaska fun facts?
Yeah, go ahead.
Guess how many lakes they have in Alaska? This number is astounding.
Okay, I'm just going to, I don't know, I'm going to throw one out though.
Go ahead.
36.
Over 3 million with an M. 3 million lakes. So you almost had it. Yeah.
Wait, you're lying.
No, I'm serious. I have like 5 sites on Google here that are telling me there are 3 million lakes or more.
What?
Yeah. And they have more volcanoes than any other state. And
more than Hawaii?
Yeah. Let's see how many they have. They have more than 100 volcanoes and volcanic fields.
Are you serious?
I am serious. And then, guess what? If you think Ireland is your only choice if you want to get rid of snakes, guess where you can go?
What do you mean get rid of snakes?
Alaska is famous for its complete absence of snakes.
Are you serious?
Yes. I mean, I feel like I'm just blowing your mind here.
You are. This is crazy. This is an authentic reaction, too.
Why don't we hear firsthand about this from our guest, U.S. Senator Lisa Murkowski from the great state of Alaska. Senator Murkowski, thanks so much for joining us today.
Super great to be with you. Looking forward to this conversation.
I think we're going to spend a little bit of time probably illuminating people about Alaska
my
in
favorite.
general.
Okay.
Well, that's what I was...
Good.
We hope so.
I was wondering,
Yes.
It is a huge state. When you explain how big it is, do you have any way you try to explain how big Alaska is?
Well, it's not that we want to try to put Texas in its place, but we do remind people
Yes.
that if they think that Texas is big, they need to know that you can cut Alaska in half and we would still be larger than the state of Texas. In fact, we are 2.5 times larger than the state of Texas. I don't think I have one with me right now, but on my business cards, if you flip it on the back, you have the map of the continental United States, and then you have Alaska overlaid. And you can see that from the southeastern part of the state where I was born, you stretch that all the way out to the end of the Aleutians. You're basically going from Florida to the California coast, and then from the Canadian border, just about pretty much down to the Gulf. We are like big.
That's
Wow.
insane.
Yeah.
It is insane.
It's mind-blowing.
66,000 miles of coastline.
Which I'm
Wow.
dying
Now
to
we have a
see.
lot of islands, and
So a lot
we.
of swimmers out there then, huh?
Well, no, it's cold. It's cold.
I meant the animals.
Yes, the animals all know how to swim. But yeah, it's.
Well, let's talk about what it's like then. Something that's that large, and we're looking at a map in our studio right now. It's too much to take in, frankly, even on a 16:9 screen. A lot of people in the continental United States, and you would know better than me how many people have actually visited up there. Think maybe it's either just like the rest of the U.S. I don't know how they could think that, or it's just so wildly untamed. I mean, you're taking your life in your hands as you try to call an Uber and a sled dog shows up. I mean, what is it like in Alaska?
Alaska can be like a city in the lower 48. You come to Anchorage where my husband and I live now, and it looks like a city. It's got dramatic backdrops. Our mountains are stunning, and we have the water. It's pretty remarkably beautiful, even in the city. But you have all the amenities. You've got sidewalks and streetlights, and so, yeah, it's not so raw and wild. But as we say in Alaska, you just have to go out the back door of Anchorage, and you're really in the real Alaska. An area that is so large that we're just not connected.
Yeah.
And think about what connection means to us here in the lower 48. That's what we call the rest of you guys. Hawaii and Alaska are off over here, but the lower 48, you've got a transportation grid, a corridor. You've got an energy grid where you kind of tie in, you move your power around. You've got a communications grid that all makes sense. we're not that. Think about it this way. Over 80% of the communities in the state of Alaska are not connected by a road.
Wow.
So what does that mean? So when I talk to people about rural and what rural is, I think every state has rural. Got it? Everybody does. But I think in so many states, rural is you drive a long ways on a road, and you find a road that turns to gravel, and you find a little town, and you go out the back end of the town, and there's another gravel road, and you go out there and you find these connectors. Well, here we just don't even have any roads. And so rural takes on another concept. We don't call it rural. We call it rural Alaska, but then there's bush Alaska, which is even more remote and inaccessible. So people fly, and we don't fly in fancy jets. We have bush planes. We have small commuters. I have a nephew, actually, who's a pilot for one of the small air carriers up outside of Nome, and his service area where he flies caravans, 6-8 passengers, is probably the size of West Virginia that he's covering with his plane every day.
So people literally fly more than they drive in Alaska.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And to give you an idea of how far off it is from the continental United States, I mean, you could easily drive 2 or 3 days to get between the two. Is that right?
So my son just recently got married, and he moved his stuff. I wish that I could say he moved his stuff from Tennessee to Alaska, but he moved his stuff from Alaska to Tennessee, and it was a 5-day drive.
Wow.
But keep in mind, if he was being like reasonable and not some aggressive young man who wanted to get himself situated, he would have taken a week, because that's what you really need to be doing. So he was pretty much
Suffice
driving.
it to say, it's pretty far away.
It's pretty far away. In order to get to Alaska, you have to go through another country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we share a pretty significant border with Canada. So yes, we fly. We take boats. If you are up on the Yukon or the Kuskokwim River, very, very significant river systems, you're pretty much in an open skiff. It's not like there's fancy boats. And so think about when you don't have a transportation grid and you're flying everywhere. It's not cheap. Just because you have a lot of small aircraft doesn't mean that anything is cheap. In fact, it's very, very, very costly. And so when you need to go for medical care, if you need to go for school or education, if you quite honestly just want to go shopping for groceries, because again, you're living in a community where you don't have a Target, you don't have a grocery store to speak of. You might have a small village store, but things are pretty expensive. And when I say pretty expensive, I go into every village store that I'm in, and I kind of do cost comparison. Like, everybody has to wash your clothes, right? So I can't tell you how many pictures I have of Tide laundry detergent, because it's kind of like my price point here.
Yeah.
And in some communities, you'll be spending $60 for a box of Tide.
Wow.
This Deer Park water that I'm drinking, you can get the bigger bottles, the 8-ounce bottles. You get a 24 case, 24 unit
case,
thing at Costco or wherever. You're probably going to spend, I don't know, between $10 and $15 for something like that. I was in one of our northwestern communities last summer. I went over to look at the same case of water to price it, $99.
Wow.
$99. And think about this. This is a community that doesn't have running water into the individual homes. So you have a main water spigot, usually at what they call the washateria, which is where you would have families be able to go use washing machines So wash their clothes, have showers, because again, if you're in a village that doesn't have running water, how do you keep your family clean? How do you keep yourself clean?
So if the national brands are just so much more expensive in Alaska, just because of getting them there, really, are there a lot of Alaska-based brands and small businesses that maybe to fill that gap that we wouldn't have here in DC? Yeah, I mean, how else do you?
Well, the way that most people in rural Alaska, and again, we're talking about the remote areas, the way that they ensure that their families are fed is through subsistence. It's fishing, it's hunting, it's gathering berries. It is providing for your food resource off the land there, and you put up your fish, you put up your berries, your jam, and you hope that it was a good year for hunting and fishing, because that's what you use to offset. We do not produce really much of our own food. It's somewhere between
Even with
90 seafood is different.
Okay.
Yeah.
But when we're talking about the food that is in a grocery store,
Right.
somewhere between 90 and 95% of all the goods and materials that come to Alaska, that we utilize in Alaska, come in from the outside.
Right.
Wow.
From the lower 48.
Right.
So think about it from a food security perspective. We have the food container ships come up twice a week. And you've got your grocery stores that have your fresh stuff.
Right.
But you're bringing it in from Washington State. Some of it is trucked across through Canada.
Okay.
If you talk to people in rural Alaska about what color is a banana, I think that many of them would not say yellow, because
They come in green.
they're either green or they are
Yeah.
brown.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So food aside, though, I mean, you mentioned Tide Pods. Like, are there local businesses that, have created kind of an offshoot of laundry detergent? Like, I use kind of a smaller brand called Molly Suds, right? Like, I don't use Tide. But if it's so hard to get Tide, I mean, would it be cheaper for people to just use an Alaska brand?
It would be cheaper to use an Alaska brand, but the challenge that we have is you might be able to create your own soaps, but how do you package them
Right.
to sell them? Because we're not manufacturers.
Right.
The only area of manufacturing that we really have in Alaska is, again, Cyrus, you point out, seafood. We do seafood well. We are described as a superpower of seafood in Alaska. And it is significant. It's also notable, though, that we export the vast majority of our seafood to the lower 48, to the European markets, to the Asian markets. And so it's not as if you can get really cheap fish in Alaska if you're buying it at the grocery store.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, when you go out, you want the Alaskan king crab, don't you?
Oh, I always look for wild caught Alaskan, whatever it is, as long, fish.
That's music to my ears.
Yeah.
You want to go for the wild caught Alaska to the point about the king crab. I will tell you though, almost all of our crab, our king crab, for us to be able to buy it in Alaska, we get it right around Christmas time, but we pay premium prices because most of that goes outside.
Oh, wow.
My son worked on a crab boat.
Isn't that dangerous?
Yeah, it is. It was
You weren't
kind of
worried?
like, oh, are you kidding? I prayed more for that
Yeah.
season that he was
Yeah.
in the Bering Sea. I watched the weather. I told the
no.
Coast Guard,
Yeah.
I said, Commandant, I've got you on my speed dial because I want to know whether his boat was at all times. It is very dangerous, but we have worked to eliminate some of the race for the resource, and in turn have made it safer. But it's still, you are out there in the worst time of year.
Yeah.
You're there in January, February, March.
Freezing cold.
Freezing cold, icing conditions awful, awful seas.
Huge
awful
machinery. I mean, it's so dangerous that they literally made a show about it.
Let me try to
True
maybe take this in a different direction. We've heard about the no electricity. It's expensive.
Yeah, we want happy things.
Right. I mean, there has to be, you're not saying stay away from Alaska.
But
I mean,
that
there's
is
a lot
happy. It's off the grid. It's authentic.
Okay, well then what is the draw of that? And honest question, I think, everything people have heard, what's the draw to Alaska? And let me preface this real quick. I used to live in Montana and it was beautiful, but everybody who had been to Alaska, I mean, the other states, which would have been Denver and Montana, as far as beauty, dropped distant number 2. Yeah. That's what they would tell me.
Yeah, and it's hard for me to describe Alaska without smiling, and you can hear the smile. She's
smiling. She is
you
smiling.
You can hear the smile in my voice because I get so filled up by the majesty of the place. And I tell people, I know when we've hit Alaska airspace because all of a sudden everything just seems to be bigger and more open and more raw and more dramatic. And there's nothing soft about anything. It's mountain peaks that are just straight up from the water with just these jagged edges that are sprinkled with powdered sugar snow on the top. And then you look down and you see these ancient ravines of glacier that calve these majestic pieces of ice off of them in waters that are so blue, and the green of the forest that is so amazing. And because it's so big, there's so much that is so different. And there's so many different parts of Alaska that you could never, ever, ever get tired of it. Mm-hmm. When the kids, my boys were little, we'd make the same run over this bridge every single day to get from school to the house. And I used to call these mountains, or I didn't call them, the boys called them the oh my gosh mountains, because we'd be driving and it's like, oh my gosh, boys, look at the mountains. Yeah. And they would say, Mom, the mountains are there every day. Yeah. But every day they look different and they're more dramatic and they're more, I mean, you've got Denali that is sitting there, a couple hundred miles from us in Anchorage. And you can see it. You can see it when you land at the international airport there. You can see it from Fairbanks, where I went to high school. There's this immensity and intensity and a rawness that is extraordinary. But then it's not just about the land, the people. So the people are so amazingly genuine. More often than not, I am not called Senator Murkowski when I am home. I am Lisa. I'm Lisa, and I get into the airport there, and I'll be walking down the concourse by myself, and I'll hear this, Lisa, and I go over and, hear a couple ladies and big hugs, and I'm thinking to myself, do I know them? And I've always wanted to meet you. Aww. And these are strangers in this sense, but not strangers at all. Mm-hmm. They know me as somebody who is part of them, part of their communities, part of their state, but there is an authenticity. It's so humbling and so empowering that it's just hard to describe.
I want to touch on two more things while we just have a couple minutes left. One being how often you get back there, but just because it ties in so well, I mean, it's one of these things you can't really explain. The picture's worth 1,000 words. I mean, so to go see this in person, you really have to experience this, don't you?
Well, you do, and you have to experience more than one little piece of it.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, so the state of Alaska.
So how would you suggest somebody come visit?
Here's the state of Alaska, right? I carry it on my hand. This is southeast where I was born, right down here and raised in here. This is where Anchorage, where we raised our sons. This is Fairbanks in the interior where I went to high school. My sister lived out here on the Aleutians. This is where my nephew is in Nome. So,
oh my goodness, listener, she's covering her entire hand.
I'm covering my hand. It's not a block. It's but if you've been on a cruise, for instance, in Southeast, and you say, I've been to Alaska, it's extraordinary, there is no comparison between what you've seen down here in the southeastern waters in the Inland Passage with the interior of Alaska, or the North Slope, or the western communities, or the YK Delta, or the Aleutians.
So you can't really just do a cruise.
No. Yeah. You've got to be on the water, but you got to be on the land, and you really have to experience what it means to be off the road system. Mm-hmm. And the road system is pretty limited. So we got a road that goes from here to here and down. That's it. Mm-hmm. Everything else is like wide open. So get yourself on a plane, get yourself on a boat.
So how do you tackle visiting this if somebody hears this and wants to go up there? I mean, do you need to make multiple trips, or what do you suggest?
Well, it depends how much time you have.
Okay.
It's all just a function of time. But I suggest that people give themselves an opportunity to really explore. I know that some like the comfort of a nice cruise ship where you unpack once and you're done, and a week later you can say you've seen Alaska. But I think it's so important to get out, to explore on your own. Get a camper. Get on the Alaska Marine Highway system. Camp through some of these extraordinary areas. Go up to Denali. See for yourself. Go into the interior. Take flights out to Nome. If you're really feeling adventurous, go out to Dutch Harbor out in the Aleutians. It's time intensive to see it all, and you should never assume that your schedule is going to be as you have planned, because weather is not always a cooperative factor in Alaska. We get shut out by our weather quite a bit, but you will never regret the time that you spend exploring this extraordinary state. It would be as if somebody from outside of the country were to say, I want to see the United States. And so where should I go? You have to tell them, well, you want to go to the East Coast. You want to see Florida. You want to go up to the north. You want to see California. You want to see Texas. You can't just say, just go to one and you've experienced the United States. Alaska is very much the same.
Wow. Well, thank you.
But I can help you with your itinerary.
Okay.
Senator, we will actually take you up on that, because we love to do outdoor things. Mm-hmm. I've always looked at Alaska and I said, it's so overwhelming. There's so much to see. Let's just do the cruise. And my fiance, who actually has climbed Mont Blanc, like he's, very outdoorsy. I convinced him to do that. And now, because of the pitch you've made, I think we're going to backtrack. And
you can go up there on the cruise ship and then get out, rent yourself a car.
Right.
And go driving.
Yeah.
Go driving.
Flying,
or go flying.
Yeah.
Go flying, yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, you got to do it. You got to do it.
A lot more to say. We're pushing the limits of how long we're allowed to have you here. But I want to thank you.
We don't want you to miss your flight to Alaska.
Yeah. Well, and that's the last thing I'll leave you with.
Okay.
I am stunned by the number of people who say, I so want to come to Alaska, but it's so far away.
Okay.
All right. Look, people on the East Coast, they don't think twice about getting in their car and driving down to North Carolina, right? They want to go down to the beaches, the Outer Banks there. How long of a drive is that? Maybe 8 hours or so?
Yeah,
From here,
7.
It's only 3, but yeah.
Okay.
What?
From here? The Outer Banks?
To North Carolina?
Yeah.
No.
Oh, 7, 8. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh,
I'll cut all this. It was
all right.
8.
Okay.
It was
Senator
8 hours.
And I are
8 hours. I think so. But so look at it.
Yeah.
Tomorrow morning, I can get on the airplane at 8 o'clock. Mm-hmm. I leave out of DCA here. In 5.5 hours, I'm in Seattle.
Oh, okay.
And then I've changed planes in Seattle. It's about an hour and a half in Seattle usually. Hopefully you don't have to spend more time. And then it's anywhere from 3 to 3.5 hours out of Seattle, and boom, you're there.
Wow, it's nothing.
It's 2 changes of planes. So instead, you could be sitting in a car driving, or you could be sitting on. Everyone says, well, do you have your own airline? I said, yeah, it's called Alaska Airlines. I probably shouldn't promote Alaska Airlines, but it is a really great connection, and it's
comfortable planes, I will say.
Comfortable planes, and so it gets you there, And you just got to think about it that way. Now, there is a 4-hour time difference, and that'll catch up with you, coming and going. But the currency is the same.
Yeah.
We are part of the United States of
It's
America.
international, but it's not.
Last thing.
Yes.
Can I end on this? Because it is
Yes.
international. Everybody thinks that, well, it's Alaska. It's part of the country, all right? So we know that you must have a large indigenous population, which we do, very significant. About 20% of Alaskans are Alaska Native. But we also have an extraordinarily diverse makeup of people within our population centers. And people don't think about that. We, in the Anchorage School District, there are over 100 different languages spoken at home among the students there in the Anchorage School District. In my little elementary school, where I was the PTA president, where my boys went to school, at the time that they were in school, there were 56 different home languages, everything from Serbian to Korean to Hmong. And people don't think about Alaska as being kind of this gathering place. But we are a very open, very inclusive, we welcome people, we welcome strangers. And even though it's cold, the number of Pacific Islanders, people from American Samoa that choose to call their home far up on the North Slope in Barrow Utqiagvik, people feel welcome. So it's not only the beauty of the place, it's the beauty of the people. So come on up.
Well, thank you for helping everyone realize that. And I know your staff's going to kill us, and the state's big enough they could probably make us disappear anyway. So let's get you out of here, Senator. Thanks for being today's The Elephant
so
in the
good
Room.
to be with both of you. Thanks
Thank
for the
you.
conversation about truly my favorite
Yes.
subject.
Our pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Looking for more travel tips, possibly from other states and from other U.S. senators? Hit that like or subscribe button, and our show will pop up in your feed, and I will thank you so much. The Elephant in the Room is brought to you under the direction of U.S. Senator John Barrasso from Wyoming. Executive producer is Arjun Modi. Show producer is Carly Rapp. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, this has been The Elephant in the Room.